Does make it to where I am very formidable, regardless of kind of what people may want to put out into the atmosphere. The numbers are the numbers.
So you still haven't made a decision?
I am closer to yes than I am no. I will tell you that.
Take that.
Yo, shout the season, man.
So now that the U.S. Supreme Court has officially upheld the Texas Congressional Map, they will be allowing it to be used during the 2026 midterms. A certain one and only Jasmine Crockett is going to have a huge decision to make on whether or not to run for Senate, considering that her original congressional district is now officially drawn out of existence. And at the current moment, it's increasingly looking like she's pushing in the direction of, yes, indeed, I do want to make a catastrophic career-ending mistake simply to stroke my own ego, which is not only just good news and satisfying to see, because very soon here we may never have to hear from Jasmine Crockett for several years. But on top of that, I think is going to be a very interesting referendum on this whole idea that a lot of liberal activists and Democrat figures, progressives especially, have that, oh, well, we just need candidates who will fight. You know, if we just have Democrats who are extremely loud, extremely off-putting, but hey, they stand up the hardest to Trump. You know, they're getting arrested outside of ICE, they're cussing and all this stuff. Clearly, that's going to resonate with the American people. I've been trying to tell you no. Well, this is, of course, the perfect time to try that theory. So in today's video, we'll bring you both of these stories, right? What the Supreme Court exactly did yesterday that is officially putting this issue to rest, at least for the upcoming election, and of course, where this leaves the one and only Jasmine Crockett and a few other Texas Democrats in the state delegation. So we'll get into it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy the content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work. It also ensures that you stay up to date with all the latest news and coverage. And with that said, okay, first of all, let's bring you the news, of course, of what took place last night in the Supreme Court, where officially we can go full steam ahead.
Win for Texas. The Supreme Court allows the Lone Star State to use the Trump-backed congressional map in its midterm elections. Governor Greg Abbott writing this: Texas is officially and legally more red. This is a victory for Texas voters, for common sense, and for the U.S. Constitution. They could get up to 5 seats in theory. Let's bring in Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Greg, did the Supreme Court make the right decision?
Oh, I think they did, Brian, because there was little credible evidence that Texas had actually redrawn their congressional map based on race, which obviously would be a civil rights violation. And the ruling is consistent with what the High Court said in 2019. We will not intervene in cases of political partisan gerrymandering, only in cases where, you know, states have conjured up district boundaries for largely racial reasons that are discriminatory. And in fact, there was evidence that the previous map was racially motivated and that the new map corrected that constitutional defect. So as you point out, Brian, this ruling has the potential to flip 5 Democrat-held seats in Texas to Republican next year, and it may actually clear the path for other states to do the same, blue states and red states, as long as race is not a factor.
Oh, really? So you mean to tell me that the legal basis the lower courts originally used to stay the original Texas maps was completely arbitrary, made up, illegitimate, and not even grounded in prior precedent? Keep in mind, we're not even talking about a precedent from 100 years ago. We're talking about one from just 6 years ago. Yeah, color me so surprised. It's no secret that we live in a judicial tyranny in this country. You have judges that are not even remotely trying to pretend like they're practicing a legitimate legal philosophy. You know, it's one thing to be more liberal in your interpretation, more conservative, but no, it's literally just orange man bad. I don't like Trump, and so I'm just going to strike down anything Trump does, using in many cases completely inconsistent standards, right? Because back in 2019, they stepped in and said, okay, we're going to do the opposite, but now we're just going to completely flip-flop. I brought up the same issue under the EBT SNAP issue. Remember when the lower courts tried to force Trump to pay out the SNAP benefits, and I looked and said, hey, wait a minute. Just a couple months ago, you were trying to stop the DOGE efforts by saying that a president cannot move around funding without congressional authority. Now you're just flip-flopping and saying, no, actually, even though Congress hasn't funded the government, you have to pay it out anyway. It's all completely fabricated. fabricated. It's bogus. I'd argue it's the biggest quote unquote threat to democracy we are facing. But guys, at the same time, let me say to all the other Republican states who are currently looking to do redistricting, or at least talking about it, please take notes of this, because we have to operate, unfortunately, I know it sucks, but we have to operate with the understanding that just straight up, yes, the courts, the judiciary absolutely will not be fair to us. Why do I bring that up? Well, as we recently discussed, for instance, with Indiana, right? You cannot operate under the framework that, oh, we're just going to redistrict sometime next year and it'll go over without a hitch and that's fine. No, you have to anticipate. You have to be able to foresee the fact that, yes, indeed, whatever map you pass, even if it's totally compliant with the Voting Rights Act, it's totally compliant with all the laws, is going to get harassed, it's going to get stayed in the courts, and you have to kind of plot out time for that different legal battle. Now, if a liberal state does it, right, California is going to deal with, I guarantee you, no single legal challenge is going to get thrown out the court immediately. If Virginia goes through same exact thing. But of course, to these other Republican states who are currently holding their feet, right, taking their sweet time, please understand. Okay, Indiana, Florida, I know they haven't done it yet. They've just been talking. A lot of other states. Look, it sucks. I know it's totally unfair, but if we're going to be pragmatic, if we're going to play to win, then we just have to operate with an understanding of this. Why am I bringing it up? Because if these Republican states, for instance, are looking to redistrict, I don't know, like early sometime next year, January, February, and let's say their candidate filing deadline is in about March or April, they might think to themselves, okay, we can get it done in a couple weeks. It'll pass. Surely that'll be fine. But you have to expect this, right? There's going to be several legal challenges. And then what happens, right? So say it gets stuck in the courts and by the candidate filing deadline, there's no decision or there's an administrative stay, there's an injunction on it. Then guess what happened? You completely screwed yourself over. So again, I'll say, I know it's unfair, but if you're a conservative in this country and you're trying to do something legislatively or legally, you have to, first of all, make sure it's like extra airtight, extra bulletproof from that argumentative perspective in a way that liberals don't have to, because they can get away with anything. But secondly, right, if you're going to do redistricting, you have to allow the timetable for all of this stuff to be sorted out, because you know they're going to harass us. So I would just like to point that out for some of these sort of squishy or rhino state legislatures who are like, yeah, we'll consider redistricting maybe next year. We'll talk about it. You don't have time to talk about it, okay? So anyone living in a state where that's the behavior of the Republicans, they keep saying they might do it, please put maximum pressure on these people, because you can clearly see if we're dealing with an unfair system, right? We don't have time to kind of sit around and play these games, but still nonetheless, a good decision from the Supreme Court. And certainly, this is what we expected. It's not surprising, but I'm going to use it as another example of how you have to anticipate this stuff. It's the same issue with the Letitia James situation, where, that court, that judge threw it out on kind of a bogus grounding to do so. But of course, right, the issue with that attorney and whatnot, was he eligible, was he not? Here's the thing, right? I'm going to argue, yes, I understand it's BS. It's really frivolous what that judge did, but still, understand we're fighting an unfair system here, okay? You can say, oh, but how did Biden manage to get those indictments against Trump? Look at New York City. That was a totally rigged case. I know. The system is rigged against us, which is why we have to play the game like extra hard. It's like comparing to a football game or any sports game, for instance, situation where, the refs are biased against you and the whole, like say maybe they're the home team, their home state or something, you're coming from out of state, whatever it is. And what do they always say, right? You have to basically beat them so bad where the refereeing doesn't matter, right? You can't rely on like sort of on the line calls. It's the same situation Republicans just have to operate under, because of course we understand, right? This is just the game we're up against. But all of that said, of course, okay, there you have it. Now it is of course official as a result of this decision that Jasmine Crockett will be booted out of her district now that the congressional map is being upheld by the Supreme Court. It's worth noting that there will still be a Democrat district in Dallas. Before there was two, now it's just going to be one. So she could, of course, run against the other Democrat or make some type of deal and just run for the other congressional seat there. But for whatever reason, it seems like that's not currently her ambition. I don't know, maybe there's going to be some beef back and forth with maybe the other Democrat wants to take that seat. But that said, there's, of course, the current idea of her running for Senate, right? This is the other kind of political angle she's floated taking. And take a listen to what she recently had to say about it, because it does seem to appear here that she's leaning pretty heavily in that direction. Take a listen.
Data is only one part of the equation. You have to be able to execute. And the state is 30 million people. It's a $100 million race, as well as, we need to be able to take advantage of the fact that the Republicans are fighting right now and they may have to go to a runoff. And we also need to make sure we have what I consider to be a strong slate, people that can also raise money, people that also have kind of different groups of people that are attracted to them. And so it's more so logistical than anything at this point in time. But for sure, we did not stop our evaluation, because the evaluation made it clear that the coalition that won on November 4th, Black and brown folk, when you look at the numbers in New Jersey, when you look at the numbers in Virginia, it was making sure that Black and brown, number one, showed up and voted the right way. I am the leading candidate when it comes to those two specific constituencies. And so it does make it to where I am very formidable, regardless of kind of what people may want to put out into the atmosphere. The numbers are the numbers.
So you still haven't made a decision?
I am closer to yes than I am no. I will tell you that.
Like that.
But regardless of what people think, strategy matters and execution matters. And there are a lot of people that don't believe in Texas. And so for me, if I am going to tell people that they need to believe in Texas, I need to not only have numbers on a piece of paper, I need to be able to tell them this is exactly how we're going to get there. And part of that equation, for me, again, comes down to what type of ticket, instead of relying on one person to kind of carry the load, what type of ticket. So I've actually been talking to other candidates, potential candidates as well, trying to recruit them.
Well, you just heard it straight from her own mouth. In her own words, she is more of a yes than she is a no. Now, of course, when you look at the current state of the polling for the Texas Democrat primary, it should not be a surprise that if she does enter the race, she will be the front runner. She will likely win that nomination because, after all, she has the most name recognition out of all of these candidates at the current moment. She is, of course, very beloved by the hardcore liberal activist base. They are infatuated with the fact that she's just as off-putting and loud, obnoxious, bitter, resentful, and egotistical as they are. So none of that should be all that surprising. But I would like to point out that the logic she is applying here as to why there could be any path to victory in Texas, especially if she's the candidate, is completely delusional and out of touch. Okay, it's worth noting even Beto, who came the closest out of any Democrat statewide, still ultimately did not win that race back in 2018. And that was, first of all, running against Ted Cruz, who is a historic electoral underperformer. And in 2018, which was, of course, a blue wave year of proportions that we're not seeing any indication, even if Democrats do win in 2026, it will be nearly the scale that it was back in 2018. But even if that is the case, I'd further like to point out that Texas itself has changed, right? There was this idea, if you remember, in the late 2010s that, hey, maybe Texas is turning kind of purple. In the past several cycles, it's only gotten more red. I think Trump won it by 14, 16 points. It's really solidified itself. And so none of what she's saying here actually makes sense. Of course, Jasmine Crockett uses the flawed logic, first of all, that, well, I'm a minority. And don't you know that in the last elections, it was Black and brown people coming together to vote for Democrats? And you can clearly see part of the reason she's saying that is the fact that the other two top Democrat candidates here, first of all, James Tallarico, that is the state rep who fled to Illinois to protest the redistricting battle and all of that. It's kind of like this Walmart Pete Buttigieg style character. He's, of course, a white guy. Beto claims to be Hispanic, but by all accounts is a white guy, if you remember that, if Beto does end up running again. So, I don't know. Maybe that's the appeal she could make, number one. Secondly, of course, she argues, oh, well, I would fundraise the most because all the Democrats know me and they like me. So therefore, money equals victory in politics, to which I say, how'd that work out for Kamala Harris? Because here's the thing. All right, as I pointed out, by the way, about the Tennessee special election, which was looking really close up until the very end when Republican voters woke up because of what an off-putting lunatic the Democrat candidate is. I'm going to say this time and time again. The problem with Democrats thinking running these vulgar, loud, obnoxious candidates is that, yes, while they may energize Democrats, and Jasmine Crockett may be right, black turnout will be a little bit higher because she's on the ticket in Texas, especially given the fact the core problem currently with the Republican electorate is turnout, right? When Donald Trump's not on the ballot, when it's an off year, a special election, the Republican voter base does not turn out to vote in the proportions needed to beat the Democrats who are super pissed off, super energized. Then what better way to actually wake up the Republicans by, of course, running a Democrat like Jasmine Crockett? See, that's the thing. Because I would argue fear is the strongest motivating factor in politics. And we've already seen a case study, again, just earlier this week, where indeed this type of character running for the Democrats, thinking that was smart, backfired and actually surged Republican turnout late down the stretch. That's the thing, for instance, about this James Tallarico character. Sure, he's not likely to probably win either, but at the same time, you know, like I said, you're not going to see as much Republican enthusiasm to go vote against that person as, of course, you would a Jasmine Crockett. But of course, she may sit there and still argue, oh, but the fundraising, you know, that's so important. Okay, so what you're saying, Jasmine, is actually you'd create a massive distraction for Democrats, right? Because this is a story that happens in both political parties, but in this case, Democrats would be primed to do. Is that you're going to get a bunch of nationwide Democrats, instead of focusing on the races that actually matter for their party, like the genuine swing states, the genuine swing resources, they're going to be dedicating that instead to this Texas race that Jasmine Crockett's set up to lose in, set up to fail. That's why I say, you know what, go ahead and do it, right? And I hope you raise as much money as possible. I hope you waste as much money, resources, and time from the Democrat Party that would, of course, otherwise be spent in better places. So, you know, on so many levels, it's a stupid idea. But even for Jasmine Crockett personally, okay, so what happens when you lose, right? You're going to be out of a job altogether. You're not going to be a congresswoman. You're not going to be a senator either. And you might say, okay, but I'll run for president, or I'll run for governor, I'll run again. I'll just run in future elections, okay? How'd that work for Beto, the very guy in your state? It turns out that once you lose the first time and then you try again, you lose again, eventually you reach a status of what we like to call washed up. You know what I mean? Stacey Abrams, same situation. She was the rising star. She was the darling. We've seen the career implosion time and time again. And Jasmine Crockett is just thinking, oh, maybe I might do it, right? So, of course, if she was smart, if I were in her position, I'd say that's not worth it. I'm just going to go run for the new congressional seat. But here's the issue, is Jasmine Crockett's insane, never-ending ego. This is something that we've reported on time and time again. She's just like wild, ridiculous narcissist. She's obsessed with her self-image, and she basically thinks she's invincible, right? So that, and you can clearly see her kind of saying that out loud as well. She seems to think she's the only Democrat who could actually beat what would very likely be Ken Paxton, maybe John Cornyn there as the Republican nominee. So I say I hope that ego takes over in this situation.
Oh, how noble and sacrificial of her. Which is the real Jasmine Crockett, though? Well, the call for public service came and Jasmine answered. But back to that Atlantic profile, they saw something else in Crockett. A raging narcissism. And for a woman who claims to be so tough, she has exceedingly thin skin. They described her as highly conscious of her self-presentation. Crockett wore acrylic nails painted with the word resist and a set of heavy lashes over her brown eyes. The lock screen on her phone is a headshot of herself. And Crockett apparently thinks she should be able to control to whom a journalist speaks when they're actually reporting a profile. 4 days before this story was published, Crockett called me to express frustration that I'd reached out to so many House members without telling her first. She told me, shutting down the profile and revoking all permissions. Yeah. And yet another gem that speaks to Crockett's highly racialized view of the world from the same profile. Crockett said that Hispanic Trump supporters had almost like a slave mentality. I asked Crockett whether she had ever regrets about her public comments. She raised her eyebrows and replied, I don't second guess. You know how that ends. Well, bless her heart.
Because if she does ultimately choose to run for Senate, that's what's going to drive it. The self-delusion, maybe all the ego boost and hype that she gets from other liberals, it hits up here, right? And the same is true, of course, of her hardcore supporters like David Hogg. Remember when he went out and said that, oh, I love Jasmine Crockett so much. She's a fighter. And I think he quite literally said, she's an effective communicator for the party. That's what we need. Really, David Hogg? The Democrat Party's best communicators are people who cannot even speak proper English? Well, maybe that shouldn't be all that surprising, right? That's the Democrat Party in a nutshell. But to all those people too, I encourage you, go give this a try, right? See if this strategy, this thesis you have about the fighters, the people who stand up to Trump the hardest, see how that actually works in a place not named, say, New York City or Seattle or Minneapolis. Yeah, I'm going to love to see how this turns out. But all right, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.